You're listening to Never Off Duty. So this week we've got returning Deputy Andrew Ford, the Deputy Andrew Ford. Is that an official title, or is that just something that the sheriff calls you?
You know what? Something the sheriff, usually says. But I'm gonna see if we can. I can get that on my door.
I like that. Your business card should do it too.
Right.
And we are also joined by Lieutenant Stacy. And so for the audience, we'll start with, you can tell us, the audience, what you do.
Lieutenant Anthony Stacy, Clay County Sheriff's Office, currently assigned to court security. I'm the lieutenant, the watch commander over the courthouse and the security of the administrative building.
Okay, and we have got some questions about that, so we'll get into that. But what we wanted to do first, we'll talk about how you got there first, what your career, and then we'll go later into the show on what that entails. I think a lot of people, especially in our area, who kind of like to watch, we're a little bit more in depth to watching that type of thing.
And I just really want to hear, since he said, where he started and where he is now. So I want to hear the interesting story.
Yes, we got a little preview off mic as I was getting introduced.
It's a story for sure.
So tell us about your career. How did you get your start in law enforcement, or wherever you want to start?
So, law enforcement, I was doing construction 2008, 2009 when the economy crashed and construction just went away completely.
Mm-hmm. I remember that.
I had a buddy that got on with the Department of Corrections at FSP, and he's like, man, you got to come over. They'll pay you. They'll pay for your school. They'll pay you while you go through school. I was like, well, I got to feed the family. I got to do something. So that's how I got into corrections and law enforcement. Worked there for 2.5 years, came over to Clay County. I actually applied for a part-time bailiff position. That's when Director Wright and Sergeant Wall was over there. And then Captain Wall seen my resume, so he pulled me over to the jail, and that's how I started in corrections with Clay County at the jail.
Okay. Now, all right, before we move forward from is this the politically correct one, or is that coming?
Right. So that's how I got started. Okay. But yeah, where I come from is completely different.
Oh,
okay. All right. All right.
Well, I do have a question about jail, and then we can either go back or not. So to me, I've now they don't. Back in the day when I was younger, they used to do like Scared Straight. They bring you into jail. They would do, there was, now it seems like it's more, and maybe it's post-COVID and post something else, but it's a lot. Like, I feel like you used to be able to get a tour of the jail or whatever if you were a citizen, but now it's kind of cracked down, right? Isn't it?
Yes, it's cracked down. I mean, that we have set up some tours for different entities, just depending on who they are. But as far as the Scared Straight, and tours, they're kind of obsolete at this point. And
it's a shame because I got to tell you, from where I'm sitting, it was eye opening. I was brought in to first. Sheriff Gordon from Bradford County took me through his jail. It was my first time ever walking through a jail, and I tell you, I think that the psyche level of working in jail has to be intense. That's where I'm going with this. It has to be very intense because you hear this all the time in nature shows. They talk about like that you can just sense a predator animal or something like that. And I don't know, there is a vibe when you walk in there, you are like amped up to a completely different level, or at least I was. And in concealed carry, they call it like code red. Like you better be ready. Somebody's going to jump on you.
Absolutely.
And that's how it feels.
And I describe it to people as, if you look at anything that's in the wild, and this is not pertaining to all inmates, not all inmates are at this level, but if you look at it pertaining to the wild, when you watch lions and they're hunting, they look for the weakest individual in the pack so they don't have to put in a lot of work. There's inmates inside the jail that it's the same concept. They will prey on the weak, and if you come in and you are a weaker individual, they will prey on you.
Yeah, it's an eye-opening experience. Like I said, I kind of wish there was a way. I hear this from certain individuals in certain communities talking about, like, oh, we should just get rid of jails. Oh, everybody should be free and walking around. I'm like, there are some evil people in this. I'm not everybody. And there's, especially in the Clay County jail, there's people awaiting their day in court.
Absolutely.
And that's important. Right. And there are innocent people that will be found innocent at least. And
but there are some folks that just really need to be in jail.
Yes.
Period. Absolutely. Yeah. There's individuals that cannot function in society. We call it institutionalized. You have individuals that started going to jail when they were teenagers, and they've done many sentences to jail or prison, and what they get is they get what you call institutionalized. They don't know how to function in society. The only place they know how to function is in jail. Now, they have rehabilitation and different things to try to help overcome some of that, but at the end of the day, some people you can't get them to overcome those issues.
And how long did you serve in that capacity? Or
So I was in detention or corrections, I guess, for 13 years. I was always on the security team. This is really my first administrative function, going to court security in the courthouse.
Okay. All right. Now, did you want to talk about before we go back?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can give you a backstory. I think it's good for people to hear, because it shows people that you can make it out of whatever circumstance you're in.
Absolutely.
So I grew up really, really poor. I used to mix coffee mate and water to make milk for cereal. My dad was disabled. He had $942 a month. That was our only income for the whole family. So of course my dad, being who he was, is like, I got to figure out a way to support the family. So he started selling drugs. They started selling marijuana, which eventually moved to cocaine. Then unfortunately they did the unwritten rule that you don't sample your product, which ended up causing a cocaine addiction. And there was a lot of alcoholism. So I grew up in that environment to where you don't like the police. You don't want nothing to do with them. You hit your brakes every time you see them. So that's the environment that I grew up in, and coming from that environment to working inside the detention facility, it makes the job really easy for me because I can relate to people and I understand their level.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually made me really good at the job. I didn't realize this at the time. I didn't know that there was a calling for certain things for people to do. But once I got in the environment and started interacting with the inmates and interacting with the other deputies, I realized that I was really good at the job, and I can relate to people on a different level because I come from the same environment, which in turn helps you, because if you relate to people on a different level, you can talk people out of bad situations. It gives you the ability to relate, to communicate on a different level, to where you almost build a connection, because at the end of the day, inside the jail, whether it's a good relationship or bad relationship, you're building relationships with people. And being able to relate and bring yourself to their level allows you to get more of an in-depth relationship with people, build rapport to where they respect you on a different level than they may somebody else.
That is excellently said. And I agree. And I think that's something that unfortunately society sometimes forgets, because we're very blessed in America and we don't see a lot of the other side, but situations can make a good person do bad things.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
And you see that more in war zones and things like that. But, or, like, unfortunately, at the end of the day, you're going, how do I support my family?
Yep.
And your options start closing in on you. That's why I always say anything we can do as a society to give people more options to provide for themselves, the better society will be.
And I think for Lieutenant Stacy, you're right. It's a testimony, because oftentimes, when I got into law enforcement, what I would tell folks is that sometimes when you see people from my community, up in Philadelphia, and I'm in the Black community, try to get into law enforcement, but they could never get into because of the strikes against them, right? And I always said, sometimes the best police officers will make, sometimes the best people who will make police officers are those who actually been through some things, so if they've been to jail, and I'm not talking about serious crimes, but, they may have had to deal drugs at one point, or their family was involved in drugs because they had no other way to make money or survive. We don't know the circumstances, but they were kids. So they were only being led in the way that their parents or their brothers or siblings were leading them to. So then how do you give them a chance, even if they've been in trouble a few times, but nothing really serious, and they look for a chance, the opportunity to actually change their life? So how do they take, they got to take the steps, but then law enforcement giving them the chance to do just that, be able to come into this job, change their life around. Well, it should already started that process, but be able to relate to those who are in the same situation. That's a relatable type of skill that can go to help talk to people, because most times folks think, well, you've never been in my situation, because we want the person who's never been in trouble before, maybe coming out of college or, come from the military, or again, just never experienced any type of, life trauma and I don't mean that in a way where it's
absolutely, it's true,
though, but that type of life trauma, which makes you who you are today.
Absolutely. And to that point, I think the biggest part that you have to do if you're in that situation is self-reflection, right? You have to be able to look yourself in the mirror, understand where you come from, and technically, I'm proud that I came up that way because it made me who I am today, right? And it gave me the ability to relate to people on a different level. But there are sacrifices that you have to make if you're in that situation. I've pretty much had to walk away from everybody that I was friends with in the high school level. Yeah. Not because I don't love them, right. Not because I don't have love for them. It's just because it's not a conducive environment for me because that's where I came from. So you have to be able to be willing to make those huge sacrifices and get yourself out of that situation, because you can never get over a situation unless you get out of the situation.
Yes, and that's true for anything, addiction,
yes,
whatever. I mean, I don't have this problem, so I haven't had to deal with it, but I do know I had a friend that when he decided to join AA, like he could not hang out with anybody that, that was just the way. He had to go completely cut people, not out of their lives, but like
those triggers.
Yeah.
Those triggers.
There was no hanging out with people after work,
right, because
somebody would, if they went to a bar, was going to get a drink, and that was just, the way it was.
Absolutely. Funny side story right now, because my dad was a serious alcoholic, and I know we probably got to move on. So when I turned 18, at 19, I had my first son, which is his 21st birthday today. So happy birthday to him.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. That's awesome.
So I literally backed my truck up to my dad's trailer. He lived over off Warfield Road on Northern Route Road, if you know where that's at. And I told him, I said, get in the truck. And I started loading the stuff in the truck. He said, I ain't going. I said, Dad, I don't want to fight you, but today I will. Get in the truck. So I put him in my truck because we had just bought a house in Orange Park South. I drove to the house, loaded him up, got him in the car, woke him up at 5 o'clock the next morning. Blake was 1.5 years old at this time. And I woke him up at like 5 o'clock in the morning. I was doing construction. And I said, you got two choices today, Dad. You can be an alcoholic or you can be a grandfather. I'm going to work. Your grandson's in the other room. He never drank another day in his life.
That is awesome.
That is awesome. That is actually a really cool story.
And congratulations to you. And your dad, is he still?
No, sir. He passed away in 2009.
Okay. All right.
Nose in the Bible, though. He completely turned his life around.
Oh, that's great.
That's awesome.
Sir. And that's a good lesson. I mean, look, I'm a Christian, so I believe that completely. But,
absolutely.
But even if you're not, you can still change.
Still change. It's still time. So. And I know we were talking about it, but if I can just really give that plug, because we are having a Hammer and Hope event coming up on May 26th, for those who are suffering with addiction problem or family members who have loved ones who suffer from addiction, where they can get some great community resources and help at Church of 1122 from 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock p.m. And that's May 26th. Church 1122 317.
Great.
Blanding Boulevard. So I just because we touched on that topic a little bit of alcoholism, but addiction, but we want to be able to provide some wraparound services to the Sheriff's Office, partnered with Clay County Fire Rescue and a few vendors out there who are willing to step up and help those in need.
That's great. And there are lots of resources. If you live in Clay County, now outside of Clay County, I'm sure they're there too, because I know I get to see the stats. I'm always surprised. I'm like, why is somebody in London listening to us? But, they do.
We have people worldwide. Listen, we have so many people who follow the Sheriff's Office from Australia to Africa to London to Germany. Awesome. So we do have a lot of folks.
It's kind of fun to look at where listeners are at. But if you are listening, there's probably a resource. And again, a lot of churches are very good about that. That's just that's something mine does too. And there's nothing, they're not trying to recruit you. Don't worry about that. I mean, maybe some are, but I can tell you around here, a lot of them just want to do good, help you. And then what you decide to do with that is out of there. But take that step, get some help. That's what's great about, and we've talked about this with PTSD and dealing with things in for deputies that back in the day, we just didn't, I mean, I'm 45, so I remember a day when, yeah, tough. You don't talk about this. It is, but luckily society is getting better about communicating.
It's coming leaps and bounds.
Some horrible things have happened in our society, but some good things too.
Good things. A lot more good
Absolutely.
than bad.
And for those people with the hammer and hope, a lot of people worry about the big picture. The only thing you should worry about in that situation is the first step.
That's a good set.
That's a good thing. Absolutely.
Now, have you worked? Have you just done the correction side in your whole career?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I never wanted to go to the road. Once I got into corrections, I just fit in. I just felt like it became a part of me. It was very hard for me to leave the jail. That's why I did almost 14 years inside the jail, because I enjoyed it so much. But I know I needed to take another step for my career.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's home to me. Really, it's so easy. Once I got into it, I never had a desire to leave or to go do patrol stuff.
Now, do you is it similar to where do you have to start at patrol before you can go to corrections, or is corrections allowed to go straight into it?
They're allowed to go straight into it. So it's kind of the same process. You still have to go through an academy. You still have to go and get state certified. Our sheriff is fantastic because there's no parity in pay. So if you're in detention or if you're on the road, you're a deputy, he's a deputy, and the pay's the same. But it's still the same process. The Leo or the patrol side, their academy is a little bit longer, probably a month and a half. If don't hold me to that exactly, but somewhere in that. But it's the same process. You still go through firearms. You still go through defensive tactics. You still got a lot of coursework that you have to do, and at the end, you have to go and take a state certification test.
And do you have to go? Is there any further training? Because I imagine, even if there's not, there's on the job, obviously, and your mentors and things like that. Because when you're dealing with inmates, you have to. I know if you arrest somebody on the street, yes, you have to detain them and bring them in. So I'm sure there's some similarities, but the difference is, this person needs to be, you're dealing with a potential criminal that at least is in there.
Correct. So yeah, there's a multitude of training that you can go through. A lot of ours goes through like St. John's River Community College. I can't even think of the other ones right now, but there's several that you can go through to do advanced training, whether it's for report writing, whether it's for verbal judo is what they call it, learning how to talk to people, learning how to relate to people. There's stress management classes that you can go to deal with it.
Wow. And that verbal judo really is that form of de-escalation, trying to de-escalate a situation or buy some time.
Absolutely, because the way you talk can either talk you into a really bad situation or it can talk you out of a situation. And depending on how you talk to people, depends on whether that situation is going to escalate. Now, there's always quirks, right, to where you're never going to be able to talk anybody off of a ledge. But for the most part, you can talk yourself out of a situation or talk somebody down out of a situation.
Right. And I always amazed from law enforcement how you can talk to a person in law enforcement on the street, and then if you hear them when they're working, it's like a different tone. Is that natural, or is that part of the training, or do you kind of have to have the knack to be good at it to start with? How do you feel?
I think it's command presence and command control, and I think it also depends on the call as well, what you're responding to. Probably on the road or in the jail, it's the same. You're going to respond to different levels of different incidents. So I think it all depends on what you're responding to. Probably depends on what the inflection's going to be in your voice. My philosophy inside has always been our main goal that we live by inside of a facility is care, custody, and control. We got to care for the inmates, we got to maintain custody, and we got to control the inmates, whether that's forcefully or unforcefully. Either way, you have to control. But there's nothing that says you have to be a jerk to do that.
Right.
And I've kind of lived by that motto. Like a lot of people read all the charges and they know what every inmate's in there for. I have never done that. Not because it's right or wrong, but I know I have to treat everybody in that facility, whether it's a low-level misdemeanor or a high-level felony, I have to give them the same care, custody, and control across the board, no matter what they're in there for. Now, as your senses heightened, my senses are heightened for everybody that's inside a detention facility, because you never know what someone's intent is, right? So you always keep your safe distance. You're always on your P's and Q's. But ultimately, I've across the board treated everybody fairly and the same. And that's always been my motto.
Well, that is great. Now, I'm going to ask, this is operational. So whenever I ask an operational question, you could be like, we shouldn't talk about that. Our listeners understand that we don't want to ever put somebody in danger by revealing something. And I want our listeners to know we are going to talk courthouse stuff. That'll probably be in segment 2. And we're going to do some officer down today. Unfortunately, this is fortunately, we have to do that. One of the great things our country does is we have a month of remembrance for law enforcement that have fallen, and this is the month. We had it was it Monday was the
Tuesday police memorial.
Beautiful memorial here in Clay County, and check out it. Is it still on Facebook?
It is on Facebook. We did a Facebook Live for it,
so check that out. So I wanted to let everybody know we're going into that, because sometimes people go, well, what about the stuff you said you're going to talk about? We want to talk about. You never know what people's interests are, so stick around for that. But now back to this with jail operationally. So how does it work? Somebody can you walk us through a new inmate comes in their first day? What do y'all do, and what do they? So if you're listening, about to get put in jail, here you go.
Absolutely.
So this is what you could expect.
So once an arrest is made on the street, the officer on the street or the deputy on the street will bring them in. They'll bring them into the Sally Port. Once they're in the Sally Port, they'll remove them from the car, and we have what we call...
Now, do you want to tell everybody what a Sally Port is?
I'm sorry. Yeah,
what is a Sally Port?
So Sally Port has an entrance and an exit for the patrol vehicles to pull into so that they can be secured when they actually exit their vehicle to drop off a detainee.
Okay.
So once the officer brings them in, they'll bring them into what we call the 1 Alpha vestibule. A vestibule is almost like a Sally Port, but it's inside the facility. It's got 2 doors, so you can open one, put the inmate in there, close it so that they're in a secured location all the time. And then we have an officer station that's right there to where they can monitor it. So once they do, they'll bring the arrest report. They'll print the arrest report. They'll sign it, and then once they'll get inputted into the computer at 1 Alpha. That's where they'll put their basic information in, make sure the arrest report's correct. And once that's done, they'll call into the booking area and let them know I have the report ready. And the 1015 is what we call them. That's just an arrestee or a detainee that they've arrested. They'll come out from the booking area, the booking deputies. They'll conduct a pat search. So if you ever come in, make sure that you have turned everything over to the deputy that arrested you, because we don't want to find it. Because even if it's a misdemeanor charge on the street, once it comes inside the facility and you've concealed it, it now gets escalated to a felony charge.
Oh, that's good to know. Hopefully I never need it, but.
Well,
now, quick question before we move on. So if it's a Saturday night and you do something and the deputy makes a decision that they got to bring you in, that you go straight there first? Is that?
Well, it depends. What do they do? Because if it's a serious crime, they may have to go to a substation first and be questioned by detectives and all that stuff. So it all depends on what the charge is. But generally speaking, on most...
Like if you're drunk and disorderly, are you going to you? Or is that a different...
Well, how drunk and disorderly? Because they may have to go to OPMC first.
There's so many processes.
But generally speaking, yes, they would come to us.
So it's Florida-Georgia game weekend. Somebody's made drink way too much and caused a little bit of problem. Now, I'm sure, hopefully they didn't drive and they can just go home.
If they made it to Clay County...
Yeah, they've driven.
If they made it from Clay County and they were that drunk, oh, boy.
Yeah. Wow. So, but that would be... that's what I don't think people realize is you could do something that you're like, man, like I might have done that. Hopefully not drive, but you might have done something, but it could end you up there.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's a scary place. Like I said, this will change your life one way or the other.
Absolutely. So you'll come into the booking, depending on how busy booking is, you'll probably end up in a holding cell. And the holding cell is just an open cell. It's got a water fountain and a toilet combination in it. And then once you're in the holding cell, once the deputies are ready for you, they'll pull you out. There's different processes. Everybody has their own little unique way they like to conduct the booking process. Some will bring you out, take your photo, fingerprint you first. Some will bring you up to the counter and ask you all your questions. The biggest misconception when people come to booking, we ask them if they need an attorney present for the booking process. And they're like, yes. Well, if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, more than likely you're not going to get an attorney to come to the jail. And
unless you got a lot of money.
Unless you got a lot of money. But we're not asking you any questions about your charge. Our job inside the facility is to get you processed so that you can get in front of a judge so that you can get a bond and have the opportunity to get out. So we're going to ask you basic demographic questions. We're going to ask you address, date of birth, confirm your social security number, ask you if you've been arrested before, things like that. And then once that process is done, our medical team will come out. They'll ask you medical and suicide questions because we have to make sure, one, that if you need any medical treatment, that we get on it immediately so that nothing bad happens. Mm-hmm. And then two, we have to make sure that you're not suicidal. because if you are, there's precautions that we have to take in order to prevent you from being able to harm yourself while you're in our custody.
Right.
So once the booking process is complete, your picture's taken, your fingerprints are done, you'll get assigned to A wing, which is inside the facility. That's our intake dorm. So that is where you go until you go to first appearance. All right. And something I missed with the booking process is you'll get asked classification questions too. So classification simply identifies who you are, what your criminal history are, and what level you are to see if you need to be housed in any specific area of the jail.
So if lesser, like if somebody makes a decision like, all right, well, this was, a drunk fan. They didn't drive, but they caused a little fight or whatever. They're not really violent. Let's not put them in here with
violent felonies.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Which is great. I mean, honestly, let's be honest. That's
so you come in, you get housed in A wing. It's an open bay dorm, same as everything else. You get housed. You'll get a bedroll, which consists of a mattress cover, a sheet, a blanket, 2 towels, washcloths, and you'll get a temporary hygiene bag, which is just little packets of toothpaste, toothbrush, deodorant, stuff like that. And if you stay on a more permanent basis, then you'll be issued more permanent personal hygiene items. And then we only run first appearance once a day. Some counties do it twice.
And not on weekends.
We do it on weekends.
Oh, okay.
7 days a week.
7 days a week.
So you'll get pulled out depending 7:30 to 8 o'clock, and you'll get taken into our first appearance room. And then the judge is usually there between 8 and 8:30, but it's all via Zoom. So the judge will do first appearance. That's where the judge will read your case, find if there's probable cause for the deputy to arrest you or not. Once they decide that there's probable cause, the judge will issue a bond. And the misconception is even if the judge issues you a no bond, it's still a bond. It just means you can't bond out. We get asked that question all the time. Well, he didn't issue me. Well, he did. It's just a no bond.
You have a bond, but you can't get out.
Absolutely. So the bond will be issued, and there is a public defender assigned to every inmate that comes into first appearance. The public defender comes in to represent every inmate that comes in, unless they already have private counsel. If they already have private counsel, then they'll step instead for the public defender's office. After first appearance, you get sent back to the dorm, and that gives you the opportunity, because all the phones inside the facility, it's free to call bondsmen. You don't have to pay to call bondsmen.
Oh, okay.
So you can call bondsmen.
And that's a great misconception. I'm sure, you see this talking points online and never read talking points online, but, they can't even, and is it true for most, do we know if that's, or do you know if that's something that, I'm looking around like somebody might know this answer?
Right.
You're like, I don't
may not know
what
this answer. I may not know this answer.
Do you think that's common for most jails?
For free bondsmen?
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's, I'm pretty sure that's in the state statute.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
Well, that's
something
awesome.
New every day.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. I could be misspoke, but I'm pretty sure it is. And if not, the phone companies that we contract with, that's in the contract with the phone companies that the bondsman has to be free for them to call.
Okay.
Because we have to give them means to be able to bond themselves out. So that's one way to do it. And even if you come in and you don't have the money, but a family member has the money, generally you can call the bondsman and talk to them, and they'll work with you and maybe call the family member for you to try to bond you out. So
I've heard rumor that Amex carries a bond with it. You can. I'm not joking. Somebody told me that once.
Wow.
I don't know if it's true because I've never been in that experience, but
it's good to know, though.
I've heard that you can call them, and apparently they can provide the money if you need it. So
Amex stock just went all the way up.
All the way up. Thanks, Clay County.
Right. All right. So you and if you bond out, how long does? I mean, if they're like, it's $1,000 bond, and you're able to produce that, or you don't have to use a bond company, right?
No, you don't. You can do cash bonds.
Okay.
So cash bonds, you can you got to do a cashier's check or money order, and it has to be the exact amount because we can't give you change.
Right. And you can't give tips.
Usually, if it's a misdemeanor, it'll be $1,002 bond. If it's a felony, it'll be $1,003 bond. That's how they.
Oh, so they know for accounting purpose. I mean, I'm not joking. People do. You see that? Like the sense makes it easier to categorize. Later.
Absolutely. So you'd have to bring a cashier's check, money order, an exact amount. We don't take cash in, and we can't give change. Now, if it's a bond, And if it's $1,000 bond, most bondsmen, I'm not speaking for all, it just depends on the bondsman, but the majority of them, you only have to pay 10% of whatever your bond is. But it's usually a $100 minimum. So on a $10,000 bond, you only have to pay the bondsman $1,000 in order to bond out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And do you now, if you're found innocent, this is something I've always wondered. Do you get the whole bond, or do you lose $100? Do you know? Does anybody know? Sorry,
I would love to know that question.
I've always wondered.
So generally speaking, how it works is once a bond is posted, especially like most of the time it's with the cash bond. If the cash bond's posted, it goes to the clerk's office, and after the case is resolved, you'll get whatever monies is left back. But it's generally minus the court fees. And so if the judge waives your court fees and your public defender fee, state attorney fee, sheriff's office fee, all that stuff, then whatever money is left out of that bond that you paid, you will get back. So you could potentially get it all or at least some back.
Okay.
Now, all right. So last question about jails, and then
I got a question too.
Yeah. No, my last question.
Last question, because I do have a question.
Why don't you go first?
Because I'm always curious, because this is my spiel when the holidays and the weekends come up, and we try to get folks to leave an establishment, and you say, hey, it's the holiday weekend. Don't do anything dumb.
Right.
Because you won't see the judge until Monday morning. So on holidays, are judges available still as well?
They still come in for first appearance.
Oh, man.
But you're still spending, I mean, if you come out of a bar at 2 a.m., and because these are the type of instances where I think you probably would get out of jail the fastest. And we just should talk about the difference between jail and prison. People don't understand that at all.
Complete difference.
But we'll talk about that in just 1 second. So let's say it's 2:30 a.m. You did something really stupid, and now they show up where you used to work. By the way, because we're getting into courthouses. What would be what would be the fastest you could possibly get out?
So it depends. So if you're arrested at 2:30 in the morning, generally you're going to miss that first appearance cutoff, because by the time the deputy transports you, the deputy gets you to the facility, writes his report, and then gets you into the facility.
It might be past 8 a.m.
Well, we have a cutoff of 4:30.
Oh,
because we have to prepare we got to prepare all the paperwork, get the paperwork ready,
and then
the clerk comes in at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. She gets it all. She takes it over. She has to input it, build a bond hearing list, and then the judge comes in. So if you don't make it in by 4 o'clock, 4:30. You're generally there another 24 hours before you go back to first appearance.
So they could still possibly miss the holiday if we're telling you. So then my comments are true.
They are.
Hey, okay. All right.
Can play that way. Right. Absolutely.
I mean, really, think about that. You could potentially be spending almost 30 hours, if not longer.
Mm-hmm. And we've had more. So we have to schedule you a first appearance within 24 hours.
Okay, but schedule doesn't mean you're going to...
But if you come in and say you're intoxicated and you're showing out, you're trying to fight us, you're trying to do all these things, we end up not booking you in, putting you in confinement, well, you just extended your stay another 24 hours, because now you're going to miss that first appearance cutoff. So you're going to be in there. And then if you're still showing out in confinement and we can't get to court, the judge isn't going to want you to come, so they're going to pass you another 24 hours. So you could extend.
And do you pay for your time in jail?
Yes, there's a charge. So $3, I think it's $3 and something a day.
Okay, well that's not horrible, but it's, I mean,
and then there's
it does add up.
And there's a $30 booking fee. So
I mean, that is cheaper than a Holiday Inn.
Wow.
So
it is cheaper. three hots. You get three hots in a cot.
And you do hear about that. I mean, I'm joking, but about it being cheaper Holiday Inn. But I mean, you hear, and hopefully they're isolated. I don't know if we have that problem in Clay County, but you hear, like in some of the bigger cities, that some of the homeless will purposely cause problems because it's a guaranteed.
I can attest. I can attest to that. That in the bigger cities. We've had folks, we had to arrest, and they got arrested. They purposely did what they did to get arrested. And we said, man, why would you do that? He said, man, it's getting cold, and I know once I go to jail, I get 3 hots in a cot. That's
true. Like the inmates in ours called ours the Clay County Hilton. That's the nickname for our jails, the Clay County Hilton. Is kind of the running joke.
I'm sorry, I am laughing. I shouldn't laugh, but that is hilarious.
That come with reward points.
That comes with reward points. You can take out a visa. So I forgot. I lost my train of thought now.
Oh, we're talking about people that use the jail for
food
for temporary.
No, it happens. It happens during hurricanes. we've got a couple frequent flyers, is what we call them. Homeless people in here that they're harmless,
Right?
And a lot of them, when you talk to them, they don't want to be anything other than what they are. But when it's hurricanes are coming through or it's really cold weather, we have a few that'll go to where they know they're trespassed, and they'll hang out around where they're trespassed, knowing that they're going to get arrested, just so they can come.
And the reason I talk about this is because again, listeners need to understand that there's situations that you might think you have an opinion on that could be a lot more complicated than you realize. That, like, you might be like, oh, I don't want to deal with the homeless problem at all. It's not our problem. But then you realize it's a burden on your taxes from the aspect and time and resources of an agency that actually really needs to be doing something else, but it's part of your job and you have no choice.
Absolutely.
But to deal with
if you look at what goes in, just say you arrested a homeless person just for trespassing. You've now dispatched a deputy off the street that could be dealing with serious crimes to go and talk to the individual that's been trespassed. So now it's forcing his hand that he's probably going to make an arrest. So if you figure that takes 2 to 3 hours from the time you make contact to the time that you get the individual with the report to the jail. And now you add another 2 to 3 hours on top of that for us to intake him, to get him in, to house him overnight, and then you got to send him to court. So now you have judges and attorneys and all these people that are stakeholders in the community that are coming in to arraign and defend, to put him back out, to house him for maybe longer periods of time, because if they're homeless, they can't bond out. And if the recidivism for them is pretty high, they've been back a lot, the judge is more than likely going to give them a bond. He's not going to time serve them. So now they're there for 2 to 4 weeks before they go back in front of a judge. So if you add all the monies that go into that up just to stop somebody from hanging out at a Burger King, and nothing against Burger King, I'm just throwing it out there, from hanging out at a Burger King, that's a significant impact on the community in the county.
And there's a significant cost. So I'm always looking at things of, if you're going to be spending money anyways, how do you spend it more efficiently to solve a problem? And that's where that comes from. My last jail question, and what I thought we'll do is I'll ask this, and if you have another one, a deputy, go ahead. But we'll ask this. We'll break. We'll go to officer down, and then we'll break again. And then I just don't want to miss this because it's too important, especially this month.
Yes,
and we haven't been putting it off. It's just we wanted the full list and we didn't have it, and that was part of there. My last question, though, of course, for the listeners is if you could tell them the difference between a jail and a prison, so people understand, because it is different. People are like, "Oh, you're going to prison." Well, no, you're going to jail.
Absolutely. So the biggest misconception, let's start it this way. So in order to be inside of a jail, you're considered a pretrial inmate up until your sentence, which means you're innocent until proven guilty, right? So you're considered innocent until you're proven guilty. So your time inside the county, you still have certain rights that you don't have inside of a state after you've been sentenced. So the biggest misconception is you can only stay in county jail for a year once you're sentenced. Anything a year and a day and more, you get sentenced to state prison. But the misconception is we've had inmates in pretrial for the case that we just tried. It was a pretty serious case from the early 2000s. That guy was in our facility before I started. I started with the sheriff's office in 2012. I think he came back in 2011 in a pretrial status and just got sentenced a month and a half ago.
Wow. So yes, technically you could be there a long time.
Absolutely. You can be in the county up until you're sentenced. So some people, if it's not a serious crime, 6 months to a year, that you're in the county before you get sentenced. But a more serious crime, I've had them there from anywhere from 1 year to 12.
And if they decide it's federal versus state, is it still, do they stay in there, or once they know it's going to be tried federally, do they move you to a different facility?
Once it's decided that the federals are going to take the case, the feds will come down and pick you up and take you federal.
Okay. So one of my last curiosity questions there.
Which I'm sure they're not complaining if they go federal.
No, it's much better stay.
Oh,
from
really?
what I hear.
Yeah, from what we hear, yes.
Wow, interesting. Well, that is fascinating. All right, so we have talked about jails. We'll take a quick break. You're listening to Never Off Duty. you are back with Never Off Duty. So I'm going to let Deputy Ford take over this segment here.
And so today, in honor of our law enforcement community, for those that paid the ultimate sacrifice, and usually what we try to do on the podcast is read off the list of names of law enforcement officers or officials who have died in the line of duty this year. We have mentioned some of them earlier in the year when we started the podcast, and so unfortunately, this wall of honor has gotten bigger in the course of this year. So first, we want to talk about police officer Andres M. Vasquez Lasso. He was a Chicago police officer, and he was killed in the line of duty on Wednesday, March 1st, 2023. Police officer Andre Vasquez Lasso was shot and killed while responding to a domestic incident at 4:45 p.m. in the 5200 block of South Spalding Avenue in the Gage Park neighborhood. Officers were responding to a call about a man chasing a woman down the street with a gun. One group of officers went to the residence while the others located the subject on foot. They were able to engage with the subject, but he fled from the officers. Shots were exchanged as Officer Vasquez Lasso pursued the subject, and both were wounded. Officer Vasquez Lasso was transported to Mount Sinai Hospital, where he had succumbed to his wounds. The subject was taken to the hospital in critical condition. Officer Vasquez Lasso has served the Chicago Police Department for 5 years and was assigned to the 8th District. He is survived by his wife, mother, and sister. Master Trooper James R. Bailey, Indiana State Police, end of watch, Friday, March 3rd, 2023. James R. Bailey, Master Trooper James R. Bailey, was struck and killed by a fleeing vehicle on I-69 south of Auburn while attempting to deploy spike strips at about 4:30 p.m. Trooper Bailey was performing traffic control duties as a result of several crashes on the interstate when he was notified of a vehicle pursuit involving a Fort Wayne Police Department. The pursuit entered into I-69 toward Trooper Bailey's location. The fleeing vehicle was traveling at a high rate of speed and struck Trooper Bailey as he attempted to deploy spike strips near mile marker 326. He was transported to a nearby hospital where he had succumbed to his injuries. The driver who struck him was arrested and charged with murder, felony resisting law enforcement, felony operating with a controlled substance resulting in death, and misdemeanor resisting law enforcement. Trooper Bailey has served with the Indiana State Police for 15 and a half years. He's survived by his wife, son, and daughter. Detective Sergeant Mason Griffith, Herman Police Department, Missouri, end of watch Sunday, March 12, 2023. Detective Sergeant Mason Griffith was shot and killed at Casey's convenience store at Highway 115-19 in Herman around 9:30 p.m. Sergeant Griffith and another officer were responding to a disturbance at a convenience store. When the officers arrived, a shootout occurred. Both officers were shot. One officer is in serious but stable condition. Sergeant Griffith succumbed to his injuries at Herman Area District Hospital. The subject shot both officers and fled the scene. He had a long history of criminal charges with multiple outstanding felony warrants. Additionally, there is a warrant for his arrest for not showing up to court in 2022. He barricaded himself in a home near the shooting and was taken into custody the next day at 2 p.m. by the Missouri Highway Patrol SWAT team. He has been charged with murder first degree, assault first degree, and serious physical injury or special victim, 2 counts of armed criminal action, and 1 count of unlawful possession of a firearm. Sergeant Mason has served with the Herman Police Department for 12 years and was part-time chief of police of the Rosebud Police Department and reserve deputy sheriff of the Gasconade County Sheriff's Office. He is survived by his wife, 2 sons, mother, and father. Deputy Sheriff Jeremy McCain, Oklahoma County Sheriff's Office. End of watch was March 20th, 2023. Deputy Sheriff Jeremy McCain succumbed to his injuries he received when his patrol car struck a gate at a Oklahoma Christian school at 4680 East 2nd Street in Edmond at 6:50 p.m. He was leaving the school campus when his patrol vehicle struck a partially open gate while driving less than 10 miles per hour. The gate crashed through his front windshield and pinned him in the vehicle. He was transported to OU Medical Center, where he succumbed to his injuries 10 days later. Deputy McCain is survived by the Oklahoma. Deputy McCain had served with the Oklahoma County Sheriff's Office for 11 years. He is survived by his son. Patrolman Joseph Barlow, McAllister Police Department, Oklahoma. End of watch, Monday, March 20th, 2023. Patrolman Joseph Barlow succumbed to injuries received on March 17, 2023, when he was struck head-on while escorting a funeral procession for a member of his department who had passed away. The procession was traveling on Highway 75 near 151st Street South in Glenpool, where the pickup truck crossed the center line and struck his patrol car head-on. He was transported to a local hospital where he succumbed to his injuries 3 days later. The driver of the truck was arrested and charged with causing an accident without carrying a driver's license, reckless driving, and causing great bodily injury. First-degree manslaughter was charged after Patrolman Barlow passed away. Patrolman Barlow was a United States Army veteran and served with the McAllister Police Department for over 1 year. He is survived by his wife, toddler son, and mother. Sergeant David Poirier, Baton Rouge Police Department, Louisiana. End of watch, Sunday, March 26, 2023. Sergeant David Poirier was Corporal Scotty Corenzo were killed in a helicopter crash in a field off North Winterfield Road near US 190 at Irwinville at about 2:26 a.m. The crew of the Robinson R-44 helicopter was sent to assist in the pursuit of a fleeing vehicle around 2 a.m. The subject was arrested and charged with manslaughter. Sergeant Poirier had served with the Baton Rouge Police Department for 17 years and was assigned to the Air Support Unit. He is survived by his wife and daughter. Corporal Scotty Canizero, Baton Rouge Police Department, Louisiana. End of watch, Sunday, March 26, 2023. Corporal Scotty Canizero and Sergeant David Poirier were killed in a helicopter crash in the field off of Winterville Road, US 190 at Irwinville at about 2:26 a.m. The crew of the Robinson R-44 helicopter was sent to assist in the pursuit of a fleeing vehicle around 2 a.m. The suspect was arrested and charged with 2 counts of manslaughter. Corporal Canizero has served with the Baton Rouge Police Department for 16 years and was assigned to the Air Support Unit. He is survived by his wife, son, mother, and niece. Police Officer Garrett Crumbly, Huntsville Police Department, Alabama. End of watch, Tuesday, March 28, 2023. Police Officer Garrett Crumbly was shot and killed while responding to shots fired call at the 4600 block of Governor's House Drive at 4:45 p.m. A female called 911 and reported that she had been shot. When Officer Crumbly arrived, another officer responded. They were ambushed by the subject. Both officers were transported to Huntsville Hospital, where Officer Crumbly succumbed to his wounds. The other officer remains in critical condition. The subject was taken into custody and charged with capital murder of a law enforcement officer. Officer Crumbly has served with the Huntsville Police Department for 3 years and had previously served with the Tuscaloosa Police Department for 8 years. He is survived by his wife, mother, father, and 3 sisters. Police Officer Timothy James Unwin III, Springfield Township Police Department, Ohio. End of watch, Friday, March 31st, 2023. Police Officer Tim Unwin was killed in a vehicle crash at the intersection of Hamilton Avenue and Centeridge Avenue in North College Hill. He was responding to an officer needs assistance call when his patrol car collided with another vehicle shortly after midnight. Officers from multiple jurisdictions were responding to the call when the crash occurred. The driver of the other vehicle was also killed in the crash. Officer Unwin has served with the Springfield Township Police Department for 2 years. He had previously served with the Hamilton Police Department for 2 years and the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office for 5 years. K9 Lennon, Baytown Police Department, Texas. End of watch, Thursday, March 9, 2023. K9 Lennon died after suffering a bite from a venomous snake while conducting training in the 5100 block of East Road in Baytown. His handler rushed him to the Gulf Coast veterinary specialist where he succumbed to the effects of the venom. K9 Lennon was an explosive ordnance detection canine and was credited with locating numerous firearms and shell casings during evidence searches. He won the Top Bomb Dog Award, second place for bomb scramble, and third place for bomb vehicles in Dothan, Alabama in February 2023. K9 Lennon has served with the Baytown Police Department for only 7 months. K9 Rudy, Riverside County Sheriff's Department, California, end of watch Friday, April 14th, 2023. K9 Rudy was shot and killed near the 22,000 block of River Road in Paris, when tracking a felon about 4:45 p.m. Deputies were in the area looking for the man when dispatchers received a call about a couple trespassing on their property. The deputies were able to confirm the man was the fugitive and requested a canine to conduct a track. K9 Rudy's handler responded to the scene and began tracking the subject. K9 Rudy alerted to the subject's presence and the man opened fire, killing K9 Rudy. The couple then fled on foot and the wanted man was fatally shot when he pointed his firearm at the pursuing deputies. K9 Rudy had won first place award at the Las Vegas Metro K9 trials the previous month.
So our thoughts and prayers are with the families, the friends, and the colleagues of everybody that was with that knew these officers and deputies. It's a tough industry, and what is great about law enforcement though is the community and the outpouring of support, and it doesn't just end. I mean, you stay supportive of the families forever. And,
yes, absolutely. Stay supportive of the families. You know, as May is here, and next week, or I believe the week after, Law Enforcement Memorial Week, where a lot of law enforcement agencies will be traveling up to Washington, D.C. to pay tribute to the members who had already given their lives, and their names being added to the wall, along with the over, I believe, 20-something thousand, maybe 30,000 law enforcement names that are on the wall today.
Wow.
What I love about it is, no matter if you're in Florida or if you're in California, the entire law enforcement community feels it when we lose somebody.
Yes, that's yeah. It's pretty solemn. So, and amazing. But we will be right back. You're listening to Never Off Duty. We are back to Never Off Duty. So, got tons of questions about courthouses, which is your current job.
Yes, sir.
But we get a plug now. So, very importantly, you got to subscribe. You can actually listen to this now officially on the sheriff's website. Also, claysheriff.com.
Claysheriff.com.
Look at that. It only took me 18 episodes.
So, yes, indeed. Claysheriff.com. You can listen to the podcast where everything, once the podcast episodes release, it'll be up on our website as well.
And what's cool about listening to it there is it also counts towards a listener. So,
yes.
And you can click through and subscribe if you so choose. But we're trying to get this out. We make no money on this. There's not clarify that people understand this is not about that. This is just trying to serve the community to get more information out. And I'm very blessed to get to sit here in this chair and ask these questions because I try to support law enforcement, and it was awesome that we were able to form this partnership and do this. So if you have questions, send the email to sheriff@claysheriff.com.
Justin, you on point. Justin.
I know. I got names right today. I feel like I did my homework, but all I did was have coffee.
There you go. That started it off.
Okay, so you, Lieutenant, you currently serve. You're in charge of courthouse security. Is that the base? What's the official title?
That's it. The judicial section. I'm over the judicial section, if I can get it out. But it includes courthouse security and then the bailiffs.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. So are bailiffs part of the CCSO or?
Yes.
Is that true in all?
There's 2 entities in the courthouse. There's court security, and then there's bailiffs. And I have a sergeant over each one of those entities.
Wow. See, again, you learn something new every day. I'm moving quickly, everybody, because I know you're probably like, wow, guys, this is a long podcast today, but we had a great conversation. So
That's my fault. Sorry.
No, it's great. No, trust me. If it was boring, I have tricks to shorten that conversation. But this was a great question asked by Sheriff Cook, who is working
today.
Get it
right then.
No, this is easy. By the way, I could tell that she must have listened to the last podcast where I made a joke about her questions.
No, yeah.
But she does listen when she's not here, and I know Sheriff Cook personally too. She's also a friend, so I probably take some liberties I shouldn't. But she actually has amazing questions, and it's a testament to her leadership that she is a very smart sheriff and person. All right, so we're going to talk first about what kind of contraband do you see coming through the courthouse? Because I know if you've ever been called to jury duty, whatever you're doing for the courthouse, I concealed carry. And now I know to disarm, but I'm sure people forget. Is that a big deal if you forgot, or is that like whoa, I'm so sorry? And then you tell us what contraband.
It can be a big deal, and it has been a big deal in the past. I haven't seen it yet since I've been over there. I'm pretty new in the role. I've only been there since the beginning of this year. But last year alone, we confiscated over 2,035 items.
I bet pocket knives were a lot of those.
So, we've had handguns, knives, brass knuckles.
And brass knuckles aren't they illegal in Florida?
It's a concealed weapon.
Yes.
Oh,
just a concealed. Okay.
Self-defense keychains such as mace, cubitons, key knives, micro stun guns. And so to answer the question of what all is included in kind of the list of what we look for, and it's pretty vast. And then I'll give an explanation of why it's so vast. Ammo, handcuff keys, box cutters, wallet ninjas, multi-tools, scissors, grooming kits, nail clippers, nail files, tweezers, cuticle trimmers, eyebrow razors, metal utensils, forks, knives, bottle can openers.
You're like describing my wife's purse. I'm like, I could see her going in.
Thing. Absolutely. Because we get it all the time. Even if you have a significant amount of change in the bottom of your pocket, it'll show up on our scanner when you come through. And we'll make you open the purse and kind of go through the change to make sure there's no other metal objects hidden in there. And the reason that is, one, our main priority, right, is the protection of the dignitaries that are in there. The judges, the clerk of courts, the state's attorneys, the public defenders, all of those people probably have people that aren't too fond of them, right, because they have to do their job. And sometimes entails making people angry at us, right? But the biggest reason, and I don't know if people know this or not, and not to give an exact layout, but when you're in a courtroom, in between courtrooms, we have holding cells. And we'll have 40 to 50 inmates at a time inside of those holding cells. And they're coming in and out. If something gets dropped and gets kicked and gets there, that gives an inmate a weapon, one, to conceal. Hopefully we catch it.
Right.
But they could conceal it because they conceal it in places that's hard to find. And two, it gives them the ability to slip out of their handcuffs. So for the ultimate protection of everybody, it's not to inconvenience the citizens, even though they take it as that at some point, sometimes, not all, but some do. Ultimately, it's so that we can protect everybody that's under the courthouse. Because my goal every day is for not just the judges, not just the state attorney, not just the clerk of courts, is for every citizen and everybody that works in that courthouse is to go home unharmed and safe. And in order for me to make sure that's carried out, and when I say me, I'm talking about my sergeants, deputies, everybody that works for me, that's our ultimate function. In order for us to be able to obtain our goals for the day, we have to make sure these things aren't coming in.
Right. And that makes sense. And I got to say, as a citizen, I have gone through your security and they're very polite. Like they are just well-trained and nice. So I got to say, if you're complaining, you might be the one out of line, not them. Sorry to tell you that, but that's the truth.
And so the question I have, because when I go in through the courthouse and, you have private security, who are the front line, but we also have, court, deputies who are also there with them as well.
Yes.
So when we talk about those items are confiscated, is that when they come right up to that main point? Are those folks given the option to, hey, take this back to your car?
We'll give you the option to take it back to your car. especially if it's a weapon or something, and you show us that you have a concealed permit, and it was an accident. You just carry it so much that you forgot it was in your purse. We're not going to punish you for that. You have a right to carry, right? That's why you have a concealed permit. If it's a pocket knife, we'll give you the option. And some people choose to throw them away, and that's their choice. But you could either discard of the item that you have, or you can walk it back to your car. I know that's a pain because our parking's not the greatest there, and sometimes you're going to have to walk for a minute. And if you're running late already for a court hearing, it's a huge inconvenience. Yeah. But at the end of the day, our ultimate goal is safety, and it's not personal. It's just something that we have to do to protect everybody.
And sadly, I mean, like I said, I could see a scenario where my wife forgot that I put mace in her purse in case she's ever walking someplace dangerous, and try to go through security without thinking about that.
I mean, if you're like if anybody's like me, sometimes, where I may have on, shorts or something, but I have my handgun with me. Usually, put this in your bag, please. Yeah, that's what I tell my wife.
Absolutely. So, and the majority of the things that we run into are in the woman's purse, right? Because you never know what's actually in there. That's why I don't go digging through them. But the majority of the things, they're accidental. I don't think we really have come across anybody that's intentionally trying to do harm or bring something in to cause harm to anybody in the sheriff's office. It's more of an inconvenience for them when we do. Now, we do have signs posted out front before you come in that says don't bring these things in.
Right.
So we try to give you warning that it's coming, but ultimately, if you have a pocket knife in your purse and it's been in there for 5 years and you're coming to do business at the courthouse, you're probably going to forget.
Right.
And that's okay, but we are going to ask you to return it to your vehicle.
That makes sense. Makes sense. And I would say if you were going to do harm, that would be the stupidest place to try to go. I mean, I'm sorry. That's the whole reason checkpoints exist, so that people go, I'm not going to go this way. I mean, it's a deterrent. So do you know how many people you see per year in the courthouse?
I do. So last year we had 130,370 people come through the entrance of the courthouse.
How many again?
130,370.
Wow. That's insane. That is a large number. It's a beautiful courthouse, though. I'm going to say that.
And this year we're trending to do more. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead. So last year we had 18 criminal trials all of last year. This year we are already at 11 criminal trials, and we're in May, which means jury trials.
Yeah.
So we're already over half of what we did last year, and we're not even halfway through the year.
That is interesting. I always try to play what's going on, and figure that out. But
I think a lot of it's to do with COVID. COVID, not a lot, some. Has to do with COVID. I think COVID backlogged the court system a little bit because they had to shut down and stuff. Sense. So a lot of trials got pushed because of COVID. And then other than that, it's just the county's growing. The county's growing. And unfortunately, with more people, becomes more things that have to go in front of the courts.
Yeah. And I should say, for you, to throw you off here, one of your superiors said you're doing a great job. So just FYI, it's in my notes. I didn't say I was supposed to read that. It just said that. But I like to give credit where credit's due.
Well, and I could sit here and I could take all the credit, but to be honest with you, I'm the figurehead, almost like the sheriff of the sheriff's department. I'm the figurehead of the courthouse. Mm-hmm. I just walk around and put out the fires. My sergeants and my staff are fantastic. I would put my 2 sergeants that work for me amongst anybody in the agency, and my deputies that work underneath them. My job is simple. I do a lot, but I can't take any of the credit because they do all the work. I'm just the figurehead that keeps the judges happy, keeps the clerks happy, keeps the BCC happy because we run security on those meetings as well. And they
Board of County Commissioners.
Sorry,
it's okay.
They put in the work, they put in the labor. I get the credit for it, unfortunately, but it has nothing to do with me. It's all for them.
Well, that is awesome. So, do you want to throw a question in?
So I did have a question because we do hear about courthouses being attacked over the years and so forth. So as far as Clay County Courthouse, what are some of the things we do to ensure the safety, not only inside as you talked about, making sure the dignitaries within when we talk about trials and stuff, but just also the perimeter, the outside, keeping that courthouse safe from any type of attacks or anything.
Absolutely. So we have both entities that work for me, we have court security, which is made up of law enforcement personnel, our patrol guys that come to the courthouse for an admin position. And then the majority of our bailiffs are detention certified, correction certified, that pull the bailiff security for the judges. So that way it gives me a multitude of dealing with certain situations. If I got somebody that's doing something outside the building, I can dispatch one of my court security people to deal with it. So we have 2 time frames that we start. We start at 7 and we start at 8 in the morning. The 7 o'clock guys, they come in, they clear the entire courthouse. They check and pull every panic alarm that's within the courthouse. Now, there's certain offices that when the staff comes in, they'll pull the panic alarms to make sure everything's working. We have perimeter checks on a regular basis. We have canines that are assigned to detention that do security sweeps on the outside of the building on a regular basis. We have the magnetometer and the x-ray machine for when you come through the front entrance. That's to check for any metals or any substances that you might have on you. The x-ray machine looks through briefcases, it looks through purses, anything that you might backpacks. It gives us the ability to scan and see in those things. And if there's anything in question, we can ask you to open it so that we can see what's in there. On top of that, once you come through, if you do set the x-ray machine off or the magnetometer off, when you come through, there's a deputy that's down there. And with Gideon Security, which they do a great job for us as well, there's civilian security staff that works in the courthouse. We have the, I just forgot the name of them. But anyway, the body wands.
Oh, yeah.
The metal detectors will wand you. So if you ever come through the courthouse and we ask you to flip your belt so we could see the backside of it while we're wanding you, it's because they make belt buckles now that secure knives behind them. Mm-hmm. So we have to check to make sure. So there's a multitude of things. We're doing rounds constantly. When I have available staff right now, we're so busy that staff stretch pretty thin, but we're constantly doing perimeter checks. We're constantly doing rounds. Even if you go to the admin building, as soon as you walk in the admin building, the first introduction you're going to get is one of our deputies that maintains the security at the administrative building.
Okay. And then when the courthouse, so let's talk about holidays or those days where the courthouse may be closed, but law enforcement is still working. Y'all do some other type of training that the community may not know about. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So, well, I won't say the exact date. I guess I probably shouldn't identify that. But yeah, so during the holiday times, to when it's not an actual official sheriff's office holiday, but the county is, or at least the courthouse recognizes it as such holidays, and there's no staff there. It's our big training days is what we call it, because we can actually maneuver throughout the whole courthouse without interrupting anything. Judges don't like their courts interrupted too much. So we'll do anything from active shooter training. We've done tactical medical training. We actually had the bomb scare.
It was about last year
sometime,
yes.
Which turned into a huge training event where we had to go through all of ICS. I wasn't there at the time.
So it was a real bomb scare, or was it a training bomb
scare? No, it was a real bomb scare. We
scare.
found a suspicious backpack, or I say they at the time found a suspicious backpack outside, so it turned into a full-scale ICS, which is Incident Command System. I'm learning that can't just abbreviate.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So it's ICS Incident Command, where pretty much you're setting up command posts. We call JSO bomb dogs down to sniff package. Like, it was a full scale operation. So we're constantly evolving. I listened to Lieutenant Rude. Was it last week that he was on? I was like, man, how do I follow that guy? But I work with him significantly to do different protection details that we run into. We just had the scare 2 weeks ago where there was active threats made against the courthouse where I had to elevate security. So there's a bunch of processes. So any training that you can think of, we'll do anything from tactical medical to active training to bomb to just basic, I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for, just courthouse security, because that's a huge deal. Because when you do dealing with a courthouse, you're dealing with inmates, because just about every day we have inmates coming over that are in the holding cell. So you have to have somebody assigned to them. You got to have somebody assigned to the jail, or to the judge and the clerk. And then you'll have a number 2 in the courtroom that is designed to who's sitting in the pews, or designated to who's sitting in the pews. So there's a lot of moving parts that have to take place at the same time. So something as little as just controlling a courtroom and what people's designated assignments are and what they should do in those areas in a high stress situation you have to cover and you have to simplify. Like I just tasked the sergeants and they're almost done with it. Can we talk about chirp?
Yeah,
Basically?
absolutely. Yeah.
So I just implemented or fixing to implement. I just completed it, what they call a chirp plan. And obviously won't go into the tactics of it, but it's a county hazardous incident response plan, to where it pretty much just gives you a playbook for what to do in case of an emergency, right? And it could be anything from active shooter to a fire to a bomb. It could be anything. And it gives everybody designated assignments as far as where they go and how they respond. And then I've actually even broke that down further and just tasked my sergeants with, and they're almost completed with it, to make a position-specific response. So whether that's, if you're at this position, and I won't get into the details, whether you're at this post and this is your job, and it's not personnel, it's position, because personnel may not be there.
Mm-hmm.
This is your duty in an emergency. This is your duty in an emergency. So now it's so simplified, I'm going to get it put on note cards that they can carry, to where if something happens, and because let's be honest, in a tactical situation, emergency situation, your fine motor skills and your thought process slows way down because it's hard to respond to those situations. So you have to simplify it. So I got it to where each post, wherever they're working, knows exactly what their response is going to be to that threat or to that emergency of whatever it is. So it could be, as simple as you're a dignitary, you're getting judges and clerks out. You're responding to the threat, whether that's fire, whether that's bomb, whether that's an individual.
Oh, well, that's great. Now, does so I know jail has like the command center when you, because I've toured it, where there's kind of like, this is where is there, without going into specifics of where, obviously, is there something similar in a courthouse where like this is where operations is, so that do you have a central place that you can go to kind of oversee, or do you have to like basically walk the rounds to be able to accomplish that?
No, so there's if there's an emergency, I have a place to where I can respond to threat assess and see. And we're actually in the middle of a $1.4 million project right now with the actual county to upgrade all the camera systems and all of that stuff.
Oh, great.
It's bailiff control. They monitor all the cameras and the functionality of the courthouse. So in lieu of a threat, that's where I would initially respond to take command and control of the situation. Now, if it is a big threat or a big situation, then obviously we'll go into the chirp plan and we'll set up our command post and we'll do all that stuff in a different location. But yes, there is.
Because I feel like from watching outsider looking in, your job is more of a hard target if somebody actually wanted to do something bad to make a statement. Whereas, unfortunately, a deputy gets shot on the call of duty, when they're pulling somebody over, that wasn't usually premeditated. That was a bad situation that escalated. I feel like it's that old adage of when somebody wants to do bad, it's really harder to stop than somebody that's doing bad at the spur of the moment because they didn't have time to plan it.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, anybody that comes there with ill intent is premeditated, right? They have a plan and they have a way that they think they're going to execute it. It's our job to be better at execution than they are. So how are you better at execution than the bad guy coming in? Because at the end of the day, reaction's always going to be slower than action, right? So if you know you're going to do something to somebody, that person's already behind the 8 ball. So how do you make up for some of that? It's training. You have to train. You have to know what you're doing. You have to know the building. You have to know where you're going. You have to know how to respond to certain situations. But you also got to take into account that you have the 80-10 or the 10-80-10 rule, right? And it just means 10% of your people aren't going to be the warriors. 80% are going to be the good soldiers that are going to fight as hard as they can, and then 10% are going to win you the fight. So as a leader, you have to be able to isolate and identify those people and put them in a position to where they're going to be successful.
That is really well said. So I got one more question. Do you have a question, Deputy Ford?
No, go ahead. Let's hear your question.
I like to know this, especially when talking to kind of heads of, you are the head of what you do. What would, if money weren't an option, if budgetary concerns were like, we're good, whatever you need, what would you say, like, man, because the problem is you always have to make those decisions on budget of, you could do anything. If you have time and resources, there's nothing you can't accomplish. But the reality is that's not the way it works. But what would be the dream thing of, I could make this thing totally secure, and then what is a reasonable, this is kind of, if you can talk about, because sometimes you are trying, I recognize sometimes you have to argue budget, so you don't want to talk about things yet.
Yeah.
So this is the spare no expense question.
Yes,
Yeah,
right.
No expense. The first two things, because I think the courthouse, it for the most part is okay, right? Because there's tactical advantages everywhere, but there's also places that it's not tactically sound that you could do. Like our entrance, for instance, is probably one of the first things that I would attack. And I've been talking to Judge Whittington about it. He's been fantastic. We actually had a meeting last night about some things, and hopefully that'll be coming up. But because it's an entrance and an exit, so you have oncoming and outgoing traffic in the same place. I think it's a tactical nightmare if something was to happen. And then by the time the people come through the front door, your security's there. It all needs to be pushed up. So first thing I would accomplish was reconstructing the front entrance of the courthouse. Second thing would be staff. And I think everybody in the sheriff's office, or probably county, or maybe nationwide, could probably say that they need more staff, right? But ultimately, the way that you secure something is you overwhelm it with security.
Right.
We could do all kinds of things to technologically advance where we're at in the courthouse, but without bodies, you have nobody to respond to the issue. So I think money, no expense, and I think the sheriff's working on all of these things.
Oh yeah, that's worth clarifying.
Absolutely.
Y'all are always, you've got an ally there, so don't feel, if you're listening, don't feel like they're not trying.
Absolutely.
No, she's significantly taking leaps and bounds to try to fix these issues. But I don't think it's just in law enforcement. I think this issue is nationwide in every entity. But you can't make up for the human presence or the law enforcement presence in uniform. So for me, I would like to have 2 deputies at the front entrance at all time. Right now, I could have 1. I would like to have designated deputies that their sole purpose is to roam the hallways. Because there's a lot to be said about command presence. If you see a cop in a uniform, the likelihood of you actually taking some kind of action significantly drops. So I think there's something to be said. We're doing a $1.4 million camera project right now. We're going to be able to zoom in, record, playback, do all of this stuff, and it's going to be fantastic. But if I don't have people to respond, none of that means anything, right? So I think in a perfect world, and I think we'll eventually get there with Sheriff Cook, redo the front entrance, which is already in the works, and then just bodies, just manpower.
So if a person, I lied, one more question. If a person is already in law enforcement or is thinking about it, and they're like, I don't know why. I mean, they're like, courthouse security is something that I'd like to get in. How does your career path bring you to that if that's your interest?
So you can come from either side. You can come from the law enforcement side, or you can come from the correction side, because we have both. So generally the way it's been, so back in the day, I guess, when I came on, you could apply directly to the courthouse. And I've been talking to some leadership about maybe reinstituting that for people that are retired from other agencies and just want to come to court. Because what we have right now is we have an overwhelming amount of young people in law enforcement. And they want to work patrol, or they want to work in the jail. That's what they want to do. They're not ready to move into that administrative position yet. So we have to find a way to fill that void. So maybe opening it up to the public to be able to apply, that maybe they're retired from another state or another county and they just want to get into that. The other way is that you go through the law enforcement, or you go through the corrections academy. Once you're completed and you get hired on with the agency, you put in your time, and once the position opens up, you apply to transfer.
Okay, great. Was there anything else you want to talk about with courthouse, your job, anything like that that's just, and no is an acceptable answer? I just want to give you a moment.
Is that one of those hints?
No, not a hint at all. I just don't want, I sometimes forget that, like, there might be an important thing that you're like, I really wanted to get this out here. So
a lot of people watch television, and a lot of people watch movies, and they watch all the cop shows and Law and Order and the court shows, and you see the basic synopsis of what it's about. But the actual in-depth process that goes into, let's just say, a jury trial. So if a jury trial is coming up and we're going to make a voir dire list of 42, which is the ones that go to the courtroom to get questions by the attorneys to find out if you're going to make it on the 7 to 12 man panel, or woman panel, sorry. Right? We will bring in 130 to 150 jurors. So like 2 weeks ago, we had 2 jury trials going well, we'll just say with the big trial that I was talking about earlier, we had almost 300 jurors come into the courthouse at the same time through the front door. We have to clear each one of those individuals through security. Then we have to take them to a courtroom. The clerk's office comes in and does their spill. And then one of our county judges, Judge Mobley or Judge Forbes, will come in, and they'll ask them questions to see if anybody's disqualified or if anybody can't serve on this jury. Once that process is done, then we have to take those individuals. Well, then the clerk's office will make the voir dire list of the 42, sometimes it's 36, just depending on the size. Then we have to transport those individuals from there to the circuit court. And then once they're in the circuit court, the judge will come in, the state will be there, the defense will be there. The state's always got the burden, so they always go first. They'll ask them questions, and if it's a death penalty case, they'll ask them death penalty disqualifier questions. And then the defense goes. It's a process, a lengthy process. Mm-hmm. And then once that's done, each side gets what they call scratches. So you're allowed 6 to 10 scratches, depending on the case. Then the attorneys will talk and argue back and forth about who they want as jurors, and they'll scratch people. And at the end of that, that is when you actually get the jury list that sits on the panel inside the courtroom. So it's not like you just walk into the courthouse, you got your jury letter, and you're like, I'm on the jury. It is a very extensive process. So if you ever come to the courthouse for jury duty, understand it's a very extensive process with a lot of different working entities to get to the point to where you actually serve on the jury.
Yeah, and I would say too, don't complain about our court system if you're not willing to serve on the jury.
Absolutely.
So you lose that right when you are trying to actively get out of jury duty. And I get it; it is a burden because I mean you have to usually give up work and
time,
and what your employer has to pay you is nowhere normally near what your actual pay is. So it is a burden, but it's also a duty and a privilege that serves our community. So I encourage you to, if you are able to serve,
do it,
and it helps your community. So.
And then once you're on the jury, if you do make the jury, don't think the attorneys and the deputies are being rude because they quit talking to you. It's an absolute must that we can't talk to you so that it can't cause a mistrial.
There you go. Things people need to know. Well, thank you so much. This was a great episode. Thank you for listening. Deputy Ford, thank you for being here. Any other last moments?
And listen, I would just say, I just really want people to take the time, if you can, please, just to, say a prayer or just think about it. You see a law enforcement professional, you happen to pass by, just tell them thank you, just because of the times we're in, but also just because of the fact that, Police Memorial Week, as a lot of men and women from law enforcement agencies across the country, across the nation, will be heading up to honor those that paid the ultimate sacrifice, and just be kind to everyone.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. You are listening to Never Off Duty.